Hello, everybody. I'm Brett Wright, and I have the honor of being the director of Tigers University or Tigers United University Consortium. It's a collaboration among 4 land-grant universities: Auburn, Clemson, LSU, and Missouri. So we want to welcome you to the first installment of our webinar series on saving the world's tigers. This series will be held over the next 2 years in the run-up to the Vladivostok Summit in late 2022, and will feature some of the world's leading experts on tiger conservation. Today, we welcome Mr. Keshav Varma, the founding director of the World Bank's Global Tiger Initiative and one of the preeminent forces behind the historic summit on tiger conservation in St. Petersburg in 2010. The focus of his talk today will be on the challenges faced prior to that summit, its significance in the declaration that was declared, and the monumental efforts still needed as we continue the road to Vladivostok. If you would ask your questions through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, Mr. Varma will answer some of those questions at the end of his talk, and then we will compile additional answers to all your questions and then distribute it back to the participants today. So with that, please help me welcome Mr. Keshav Varma. Keshav?
Hi, thank you very much, Brett, and it's such a pleasure to be able to talk to all of you and share some experiences of life, some of these important measures that were taken for tiger conservation. So I personally grew up under a great influence of Jim Corbett in a place which is the Kumaun Hills, where Corbett hunted man-eaters. You know, in the 1920s and 30s, India had more than 100,000 tigers and as many leopards, and man-eating was a big issue. Corbett was a great conservationist, but he also made sure that the human-tiger conflict does not turn into something gruesome in which the entire economy of villages would get completely destroyed. Corbett was a great conservationist, and his influence has been with me. I, as a child, have walked in jungles where tigers have been there. I have enjoyed the music that is created when the tiger walks the jungle, the alarm calls, the entire jungle coming up, you know, singing, calling, alarm calls coming, and you can actually map the way the tiger is moving in a jungle. But during my experience of seeing so many tigers and, you know, being in rather interesting situations, I have seen and I have felt a kind of divinity, a spiritualism that is always present when there is a tiger around you. The entire forest feels it, the animals feel it, and it is something to be really experienced. It is a transformational thing for people, and I would really recommend to all of you who can come to India or to any of these Asian countries where we can make sure that you come and see what the influence the tiger has on the psyche, on the folk tales, and everything on the tigers of the people. Now in 2006, let me go through a whole story of what really happened. I used to be director for urban development at the World Bank. 2007, I presented a paper on India tiger crisis. The paper, fortuitously, was actually picked up by the president of the World Bank. It kind of conveyed the kind of serious situation of tiger extinctions in 2 major national parks of India and tiger numbers going down. Manish, can you show the situation in 2006 when we were looking at the tiger numbers? They had gone down from more than 100,000 tigers at the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century, to less than 1,411 in India and less than 3,000 tigers across the world in 13 tiger range countries. The important thing which was to be really, which I need to convey to you, was that there were a lot of people who were in great conservationists and tiger gurus who were very concerned about what is happening to tiger numbers, but there was no there was no effort which was bringing everybody together. There was no advocacy that really meant anything. So in 2008, the president of the World Bank said, why don't we launch the Global Tiger Initiative in partnership with GEF as well as the Smithsonian. So it was launched in 2000. Can I see the slides, Monish? It was launched in 2008. And this, this actually created a stir in the world of conservation, the launching of the Global Tiger Initiative by the World Bank. Everybody, frankly, was surprised why an international financial institution was getting into tiger conservation. But then the president was passionate, I was pushing, and there was, of course, a lobby in the World Bank which was quite opposed to it. But this was launched in 2008. And the few of the features of this Global Tiger Initiative, or the defining principles, were that it brought the tiger range country in the forefront. Earlier to this, the problems and the challenges were being communicated through NGOs and conservation partners, which countries had. But this was the first time the countries were coming together on a single converging platform where they could, with confidence, convey the challenges that were there. And that really made a difference. Of course, the World Bank's power of convening countries is obviously there. And we could infuse a sense of urgency in dealing with the situation. The situation was grim, as you can see, tiger numbers were going down and habitat was also going down in a significant manner. I think that is even more significant, the erosion or the dilution of the habitat in addition to tiger numbers coming down. So the challenges that we were facing at that time were, one was the lack of management capacity. Human resources in this insular forests management, human resources were not present. Poaching of habitat, which I have often talked about it, was actively taking place. Even today, it might be taking place. Poaching of wildlife, that was rather rampant. There is a huge, intense demand for wildlife parts, particularly for tigers, which goes straight to the Chinese, pharmacopoeia for their traditional medicines. It also goes to Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries, which have a lot of classical medicines based on tiger parts and derivatives. A very unorganized urbanization and infrastructure growth. Billions of dollars. I mean, at that time, China was putting in $300 billion in infrastructure. India was trying to follow through. Almost 5.6% of the GDP was actually going into these infrastructure urbanization projects, which were fragmenting the tiger conservation landscapes. All tiger conservation business was under-resourced and poorly equipped in terms of human capacity. Under-resourced because in the policies of the government, in terms of their priorities, tiger conservation or environment was really not a great priority there. So we started by contacting the tiger range countries, and thank you for coming out with this. This particular slide kind of shows what is the extent of the problem is. The illegal wildlife trade market is actually any I mean, anything between $20 billion to $40 billion. It is considered to be even more profitable than, drugs and illegal trade in weapons and other things. We were losing wildlife species, but tiger being the main species was actually affecting other species in the countries. Can we go ahead? It is important to see how this whole business was going on. There was shooting, there was poisoning of tigers, there was snaring. I mean, I was just recently reading a report in which thousands of snares are being taken out every month, even today. They were using country-made bombs, they leg hold traps and electrocution in the forest. So illegal trade, and the illegal trade is, we have to understand, is very organized business. It is not like the way it used to be. Now they move, they are mobile, they move in SUVs, they have these semi-automatic weapons, they use wireless and other communication material. So in many countries, I think, and most of the countries, the illegal traders and poachers are actually very well connected to each other. What happens is that a demand gets generated from, say, China. Some rich person in China wants tiger parts. And then he says, okay, I'm willing to pay $200,000 or $300,000 for a tiger which can be brought from the wild. That is picked up by the illegal trader, who is an international illegal trader. They come to a country, they negotiate with the national level traders, and finally, a contract is given to the traditional hunting communities in the countries. India has almost 500,000 people who belong to the traditional hunting communities, who will take up a contract and would snare and trap the tiger and kill them with, in a manner that there is no sound. So this would then, the material would be carried on headloads across the borders. There are markets right on top of Myanmar. There are markets in open wet markets in China where they are all distributed. And this is unfortunately still going on. Please go ahead. So one issue which is important to know about illegal trade and traffic, whether it is ivory or whether it is, tigers or leopards or, pangolin, is that this is the trade is not just confined to East Asia. It is very much present in Europe and it is very much present in US. And the demand is definitely stimulated by demand from US as well as in European countries. This is an important issue. One issue which we faced in the World Bank from a lot of our other sectors was, what the hell is World Bank trying to do with tigers conservation? And we had to really go back to, to the countries and map poverty figures and tribals who were staying in tiger landscapes and around them, and found out that tiger conservation landscapes and the areas contiguous to them are deepest pockets of poverty. Just in India, 275 million people live just close to forest, are dependent for their livelihoods on forests. So it's a huge issue of poverty elevation, and how tiger, when it is in a national park, does generate economic value for the people. And that is an important thing which we could convey, that if you take a national park in India like Ranthambore or Corbett, thousands of people visit it, it generates livelihoods, it generates a lot of employment and talent around it. And we could convince other sectors of the World Bank, but that was a big challenge which we were facing within the World Bank itself as we move forward. In 2010, as we were, advising countries to come together with their national tiger recovery programs and global tiger recovery programs, can we move forward to the event, to St. Petersburg thing? As we were moving forward, we thank you. I was once got a call from our president saying that, he was going to Moscow and there was a meeting of the G7, and that what should we be really discussing in this meeting of G7 as far as tiger conservation was concerned. He said he'll be meeting Mr. Putin out there. So we did some research on this. This is these are things which are important to share because in life and in the way things move, there are some events which seem to happen in such a fortuitous manner that one really, one reflects on it as to how come such an event has taken place. So, we did some research on Mr. Putin, found out that he was quite a wildlifer. And we gave a small note to the president that he should discuss. There was a lot of call for a summit, a tiger summit, to raise the profile and to really bring all the tiger gurus and conservationists together. But this call had existed for over 2 decades and nothing had happened to it. So we wrote a small note that if we could discuss with Mr. Putin the possibility of a summit where the global leaders could come together, that would be great. So I don't know what happened there, but the chief of staff of the president of the World Bank called me up, Noman Mirza, and he said, Keshav, I want to just convey to you what transpired in this meeting. The G7 meeting was on, the economic issues and the economic crisis were being discussed. And there was a bit of a lull in which our president, Mr. Zelik, turned to Mr. Putin and he said, we have launched the Global Tiger Initiative. The interpreter who was sitting behind thought he was talking about tiger economies. So he interpreted it that way to Mr. Putin. But our own country director, who also was rather fluent in Russian, said, no, he's not talking about that. He's talking about Global Tiger Initiative. Mr. Putin just requested a 5 minutes, interval, and he turned to Mr. Zelik and he said, what is this about? And it was explained that this was something to create a unified platform, a global platform where political will and we can do something for saving tigers. He said, I'm very interested. Why don't we co-host the summit in St. Petersburg in 2010? And that is something which is unbelievable, that a summit, the whole progression toward the summit, the way the preparations were made, the politics around it, the protocols around it, and of course, the grandeur of the summit is something I would like to convey, because the moment we moved into summit, there was a lot of euphoria, but we were also surprised by a lot of partners pulling in different directions. And there was a kind of a signal coming in, why is the World Bank leading it? What is the credibility of the World Bank leading it? And that really surprised everybody else, because this is something that Mr. Zelik had actually himself advocated and happened. So that was one thing that happened. The other was of course, the tiger range countries felt great. We conveyed the dates and the schedules, and we started moving on the development of the national tiger recovery programs, which every country had to have, given the status of their tiger situation, and of the global tiger recovery program. Finally, the GEF and Smithsonian came in with all their technology as well resources. I think, I can't imagine how well the Russians did it. But the summer palace of Catherine the Great was opened up. There was Cossack bands playing when it was snowing in the month of November. And this was one of the most unbelievable, grand events that took place. Bollywood, from Bombay, and Hollywood stars, Leonardo DiCaprio and Harrison Ford and Bo Derek, all of them landed up. In addition to, of course, there were cabinet ministers from all countries, and there were 5 prime ministers from Russia, Beijing, from China, Laos, Bangladesh, and Nepal. I mean, it really, if you see this picture, I mean, of course, Mr. Zelik was moderating the whole thing. But if you look at it and to visualize that for a single species, there was such a congregation, global congregation, which had never happened in the history of the world. This was possible. This is an important issue which has to be understood. This was possible because there were a lot of champions in the countries who took up the cause. There was Mr. Suwit, who was Deputy Prime Minister in Thailand. He was a brilliant speaker. Pema Gyamso was Environment Minister of Bhutan. Deepak Bohra was Environment Minister of Nepal. We had, of course, Mr. Zelik. And we had, so what really was extremely important is that this movement was taken over. This whole alliance of Global Tiger Initiative was reinforced by the champions from the countries. It gives so much strength to Global Tiger Initiative. The St. Petersburg Declaration laid out what needed to be done, where to enhance legislation and penalties against illegal trade and traffic, to keep core areas completely free of any kind of encroachment, to have core areas which are inviolate, to take effective action against illegal trade and traffic, and to raise resources. So countries really moved forward. The political authorization that the Tiger Forum or the Tiger Summit created helped the countries to make serious amendments in their environmental policies. And the importance of the Environment Ministry was for the first time realized. I mean, there is something I must share with you, is the Minister of Finance of Nepal was trying to get an audience with the President of the World Bank. Now, this is this is the annual meetings when all finance ministers land up at. But generally, according to protocol, there is a quota of ministers who can only meet the president, because he can't meet 186 ministers coming up there. So he wasn't getting an audience, the finance minister. So he called up the environment minister, Deepak Bohra, and he said, could you help me in getting an audience with Mr. Zelik? Deepak Bohra called me up, and I talked to Mr. Zelik, and he said, Keshav, this is outside the protocol. I said, still meet him, please. And he could meet the president of the World Bank. So this is the first time that the Minister of Environment was the person who set up an appointment or facilitated a meeting between the finance minister of Nepal. This had never happened. I mean, and budgets went up, a lot of places doubled. Over $270 million were actually released into various countries, and countries created new national parks. India went fast. It created 10 new national parks, illegal trade and traffic. The laws were made much more stringent. So it was an amazing impact that the Tiger Forum had. And I must say that this, as we move into Vladivostok in September or October 2022, it is truly natural that the next one, on the Tiger Year of the Tiger, is also taking place in the heartland of the Amur tiger. I must thank the Russian government for the hospitality, the patience, and the kind of vision they showed in doing this. You'll be also happy to know that in Russia, tigers in the wild, when we did the 2008 census there, I think there were 350 tigers, 400 tigers. Russia, in its today's presentation, said they have more than 600 tigers now and moving towards 700. So one of the things about St. Petersburg was to double the number of tigers by 2022. Now, that is something that we now need to reflect upon, because once the tiger, this St. Petersburg was over and there were some changes that took place, the Global Tiger Initiative had to move out of the World Bank. You know, the usual thing that the new president didn't like what the passions of his predecessor. So he said, you know, I don't want the tiger initiative here. So that was also a great drama took place. Finally, we could take over the Global Tiger Initiative and to restructure it into the Global Tiger Initiative Council in 2014. But before that, something that I do need to convey to you that in 2011, this is again something rather fortuitous. In 2011, there was a message from the president of the Kyrgyz Republic, Mr. Atambayev, saying, you know, you guys have done such a great job in Global Tiger Initiative. Why don't you replicate the initiative with regard to snow leopards? The countries in Central Asia, in South Asia, Russia, China, we all need a similar initiative. Again, you know, this request was actually turned down. You'll be surprised by the vice presidency of Central Asia. They said, you know, this is not a comparative advantage as far as the World Bank was concerned. And the matter was referred to me by the president. He said, what do you think? Should we engage and open up the Global Tiger Initiative more to snow leopards? And you know, it is important for even institutions like the World Bank to understand that if a request is coming from the clients, from such a high eminent level, we cannot just say that it's not a comparative advantage. Or damn well make it a comparative advantage. And that was important. That was the philosophy of Global Tiger Initiative, to be responsive to the clients, to turn our faces towards the client and to make sure that we are servicing them and not promoting our own, you know, agenda globally, which we could have. And I think one of the major issues of success of GTI has remained is that it has represented the interests and have the confidence and comfort of the client country. So I was asked to go and meet the president in Kyrgyzstan, in Bishkek, and the global snow leopard and ecosystem protection program was launched in 2011 by the president of Kyrgyzstan. 12 countries, 12 snow leopard countries added up. Now, you know, 5 countries overlap. 5 countries in the world have both tigers and snow leopards, which is Russia. I mean, you can say China, but India, Bhutan, and Nepal. China had the maximum number of snow leopards in the world, over 2,400. The world population of the snow leopard is anything between 4,500 to 7,000. Only 2% of the habitat has been actually surveyed, so we don't know much. But in 2013, there was again a summit chaired by Mr. Atambayev in October. And then there was another summit in 2017, which was again brought together global leaders, presidents, vice presidents, prime ministers in Bishkek. So what is important here is to see the role of champions and global leaders in steering a conservation program, which is so eminently required in the world, and for the GTI to become a platform which could convene these global leaders and to influence public policy. That was important. This is also the time which I must say, Mr. Brett Wright uh, came and paid us a visit at the World Bank. He seemed to have heard about us. He was definitely representing Tiger interests. And it's great that we have the Tigers United now as partners. He came over, and then we had a rather unclear meeting, which was clarified in Yosemite, where we over, I think, 3 or 4 bourbons. After that, the MOU was signed with Clemson, and you know where we have gone ahead. So, it is Global Tiger Initiative also is an alliance of friends, of people who have the tiger and the snow leopard in their heart. That is important to understand. Now, let us go to the next phase, because as we move forward, first let me explain how the GTI Council, the GTI Council has all the major conservation organization represented by their presidents or CEOs. It has some eminent businessmen like Ratan Tata and Mukesh Ambani and others. It's the main thing is to convene, is to generate political will, to mobilize resources, and to build capacity as far as GTIC is concerned. Let's go forward. So GTIC has now become a kind of an umbrella organization with 2 implementing arms. And I shouldn't call it an implementing arm, 2 eminent partners. One is the Global Tiger Forum, headed by Secretary General of the GTF, Dr. Rajesh Gopal, who is an eminent tiger scientist and a practitioner of world repute. The other is, so it is located in Delhi, and the other is the Global Snow Leopard Program, which is located in Bishkek. And now we also have partner with the Tigers United, which is located in the 4 universities and in Clemson. So we have a great partnership, and the architecture has become more broad-based and it has developed more depth in it. Can we go ahead? So now we have 20 tiger range countries, tiger range and snow leopard countries. These flags make me feel good, because from where we started, really, from just a presentation in the World Bank on the tiger crisis, which was completely a random kind of a decision to present in the World Bank the tiger crisis in India to the India Club. And people who turned up there were only 20% Indian. The rest were people from all other countries, from Europe and US, and I think more than 250 people came to the presentation on a Friday on an extended weekend. And there was so much of interest in tiger conservation. From there to now to 20 range countries with prime ministers and others playing a role, and we moving toward Vladivostok together, is something heartening. Let's go forward. What is of course, this figure is important to see because the latest census tigers is showing that we have reached, in India, we have reached something like 2,680, which is almost on the verge of doubling the tiger numbers from 1,411 in 2008. And overall, there has been an increase in the tiger numbers. But what is important to understand as we move forward in my talk is to understand is how it is playing out now. When we move towards Vladivostok, we have to realize that there are, the impact and the efforts that South Asia has made, South Asian countries like India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, they've been able to really stabilize and in particular and actually brought in a lot of science and technology into tiger conservation, into sensors and other things. And tiger numbers have gone up. Tiger conservation landscapes have survived. Corridors are coming up, and there is a lot of virtuous capacity building. Russia, under the leadership of Mr. Putin and his cabinet, has shown amazing amount of political will, both towards the survival of Amur tigers as well as the Amur leopard, which were only 35, and now I believe they are more than 100, as well as in the Altai Mountains about the snow leopard, which are about 100 in Russia. The problem which we are seeing is in East Asia and Southeast Asia. From 2008 and then St. Petersburg in 2010, the tiger numbers have crashed in countries like Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. In 2010, they were reported to be close to about 200 tigers in these countries. And these countries have lost all their tigers, and tiger has become extinct in 3 tiger range countries, which is Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Tiger numbers have gone down significantly in Myanmar. Actually, Hukong Valley can actually take in 10,000 tigers. But in their presentation today, they were talking about 22 tigers, and tiger numbers have gone down because of poaching and various issues. Thailand, Malaysia, numbers went down significantly owing to poaching and illegal trade and traffic. The numbers have actually gone down by more than 60%, but I am proud that they are making some significant effort. Here, the impact of demand, which has to be understood by the people who are here, the impact of demand in terms of tiger parts and tiger derivatives and gels and various things has remained as vibrant, as intense as it used to be. Nothing has changed. The institutions like CITES and Interpol and others, we had brought them all together under one international consortium for combating wildlife crime known as EQUIC at the World Bank also there. But it has had, frankly, no impact on illegal trade and traffic. There is a phenomena which I must talk about is the tiger farms. China started this whole idea of having tiger farms, and it has more than, I think, 7,000 to 8,000 tigers in tiger farms, which they claim are being used for scientific purposes, but there is a lot of leakage, and they are actually feeding the market for, various tiger derivatives and products, including tiger wine. Tiger farms have mushroomed in Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Myanmar, Thailand. Actually, in Myanmar, they have actually brought in a legislation to actually legalize tiger farms. But the irony of the situation is that wherever there are tiger farms, tigers have become extinct or their numbers have gone down. We have fought this tooth and nail to somehow ensure that these numbers are contained, that tiger farms should be, be done away with. But I don't think this is happening, and the kind of profits which are being generated by companies who are floating these tiger farms, they are not stopping through our effort. This will be one of the biggest challenge as we move on the road to Vladivostok. This challenge plus as we move, we go to 2022 and beyond, the challenge of the depletion of tiger numbers in Southeast Asia and the need for a differentiated strategy, fully focused on Southeast Asia it is preeminent. That is so badly needed. We have to go and make sure that we help to create a special fund for Southeast Asia. We create convergence, we create institutions which are focusing on poaching and wildlife trafficking. Also, the role here that Tigers United and the students and the faculty can play in, in influencing public opinion in the respective countries against demand for such products. I mean, if there are students from Vietnam or there are students from Thailand who are, studying in Auburn or Louisiana or, Clemson or Missouri, these students could definitely shape public opinion. There are a lot of Indian who are abroad, and they do make a difference. I think they can shape public opinion in reducing demand, and wildlife trafficking has to be contained if we want to make sure that Southeast Asia doesn't go extinct in a more wider manner. I mean, excepting for Malaysia and Thailand, Indonesia, we don't know, numbers are not very clear, but Malaysia and Thailand, three tiger range countries are extinct, and the fourth, Myanmar, is on the brink of extinction. So we have to really think out a policy as to how we want to go. Now, as we move toward Vladivostok, excuse me, what is important also is to redefine the alliance a bit. What is the role the private sector could play in bringing in green investments, creating trust funds like Bhutan has made for generating resources. Can't remain a government-run initiative all the time with the conservation partners coming from outside. It is also important to ensure that international financial institutions actually realize the impact that COVID has had on the budgets, and to come out with a policy for accelerated and urgent resource mobilization. They take 2 years, 3 years to generate resources. We can't wait for that. And banks have to accept the equator principle, that is only green lending will be done. I'm also of the view that the initiative, Global Tiger Initiative, also conveys the importance of national parks as engines of economic growth. The value of ecosystem services, the need for more environmentally sensitive GDP, all those things have not really got factored in any of the Asian countries. GDP remains the routine, normal GDP framework. It does not take into account the value of ecosystem services, what is the contribution of forests, what is the contribution of wildlife. This is all sitting on one side. What is being discussed are, this issue of climate change. They're very difficult to put your finger on it and to really find out where we are. And so it is important that this partnership, this alliance, gets closer to the thinkers. I actually talked to Rajan, who used to be the governor of RBI, and he was very keen that we should think it differently and move this agenda forward as far as economic thinking of the world is concerned. You'll feel sad about the fact that none of the stimulus, whether it was US or Europe or in Asia, in none of the stimulus which is connected to COVID, there is any reference to environmental sustainability or environment, or the issue of how environmental health and human health are interlinked. There's no reference to it. It's completely stark, making roads, making buildings, doing urbanization, all that kind of things. Continuing, I had actually thought that would change, but it hasn't. We have to also bring in this idea of smart green infrastructure, which we talk, but it should not become an excuse for transgressing into tiger conservation landscape. We are facing a problem of large infrastructure coming into our tiger conservation landscapes, and we have to think about it. So this is when we go towards Vladivostok and we have these meetings. Today we had the first day of the focal points who were present, and Monish had done a great job from Global Tiger Forum, had actually convened the meeting. It was important to see the impact and some good work being done by some of the countries. Russia is doing terrific. Bhutan is doing terrific. Of course, I don't want to overemphasize India. It is already doing a great job. Nepal is on the verge of doubling its number of tigers. Malaysia has taken up the challenge and has said that, we have to save whatever number of tigers which are left. Thailand is also affected by that. So the countries where there is political will, one can see impact coming in. And when we move toward Vladivostok, we have to figure out how do we create political will. I think in US, can we go to the next one? US, the role of Tiger United is going to become extremely significant under the new administration. This is the first time you can actually talk about wildlife and conservation and afforestation as fundamental to climate change. It has to be done. Actually, UNDP recently did a survey of 1.2 million young people below the age of 18 and asked them for their biggest priority as far as environment is concerned. And they said the priority is wildlife and afforestation. You have to maintain and increase the number of forests, the forest cover, and you have to save wildlife. They were, climate change was not one of the top priorities. The young people, the young professionals are saying, save wildlife, save forests, then climate will improve on its own. I think they're showing common sense. And I think Tiger United can play a very major role. I have often sat through presentations made by Brett in these meetings. And those presentations did stir the minds and the hearts of people in the Tiger Range countries. And I'm very glad that now the 4 universities have come together. Your role in capacity building, in encouraging forest officials to do their PhD, your role in sharing research, and in advocacy and in influencing public opinion is critical as we move toward Vladivostok. I'm sure Tigers United would have a special slot during the Vladivostok summit in which you can make. But universities like yours, which are more enlightened, where there are over 100,000 students studying there, can shape the environment in US also. US is also, guilty of having tigers in the ranches. There's a lot of can shooting going on. Tigers are in confinement, which is not the right thing to do. We are all in favor of tigers in the wild. And whenever we talk these days about the Asian demand, the fingers are pointed towards US, that you can't just tell us. It is the United States is also indulging in these kind of practices. So we have to be careful. We have to shape public opinion in a manner that this also stops in US. And I think the young people and the brilliant faculty of the 4 universities can definitely play a role. So here, this is the picture taken by Monish. He refused to put the picture that I had taken. He's using a new camera or something, and he's moving around a lot. This is a tiger, which just generates the kind of energy and feeling, as I always say, of spirituality. But one issue which is important also to understand is the emergence of tiger-human conflict. I mean, that is something that we have to take a look at, because there is a lot of pressure on habitats, and some of the habitats, tiger conservation core areas, have agriculture practices which actually makes it impossible for the tiger to differentiate. So if you have the forest and next to it you have this sugarcane plantations, then the tigers move from the forest into sugarcane plantations. The wild boar come into the plantation, they can hunt them, and then people come to cut the sugarcane, and then they are either, they are tagged, and if a tiger attacks, there is very little chance of a survival. I mean, the tiger is the largest mammal in the world. It is the male can go up to 350 kilos, as compared to the African lion, which can go up to 260 to 280. So tigers are much larger and are more ferocious and differently, they have a different orientation. They don't do hunting in herds, and they do not allow, their habitat to be encroached upon. Tigers protect their habitat, so we have to keep that in mind. This is what you will be shown is an unfortunate situation in one of the places, Pilibhit, where there has been recurrence of tiger and human conflict, and the kind of mob that suddenly comes up and becomes a situation in which police has to be called in. And so it's not an easy thing for forest officers to really deal with. We have now we have created the STF, which is with special uniforms and protective gear and other things. And a special vehicle is being sent out there also. But forest officials are facing a lot of challenges. I mean, the range officers, the foresters, the forest, all people in the front line, they are facing the kind of challenges which are significant to be understood, and the world should know it. This particular slide will show exactly the challenge, one of the challenges. Monish, can you play it, and then I can bring it all to an end.
Uttar Pradesh, India's most populous state, is also home to more than 100 tigers. One of the 2 tiger reserves in the state, Pilibhit Tiger Reserve, spread over an area of 750 square kilometers, has a sizable tiger population. There are about 700 villages around a 10-kilometer radius of the tiger reserve. Incidents of human-tiger conflict are frequent in the area. Tigers stray from the tiger reserve and make their way into the surrounding sugarcane fields on occasions. A series of tiger attacks occurred in a 4-kilometer radius of the Pilibhit Tiger Reserve since November 2016. On 11th February, a tiger mauled a 50-year-old man in Kalinagar. Furious villagers swarmed the agricultural field in Kalinagar where the tiger had taken refuge. Officials stepped up efforts to trace and tranquilize the big cat. 2 drones were used to facilitate search operations. The visuals captured by the drones helped in tracking the tiger. An earth mover was deployed to clear the field. 4 elephants with veterinarians were deployed to flush out the tiger. Hours later, the team managed to tranquilize the animal. As the tiger lay immobile on the ground, the crowd swarmed over the area and unruly elements in the crowd attacked the rescue team, threatening to kill the tiger. Forest Department staff deployed at the site held the furious crowd at bay. Finally, the animal was transported to Lucknow Zoo. Efforts made by the Pilibhit Forest Division and Pilibhit Social Forestry Division along with other government officials, WWF and WTI, diffused the situation. Fragmentation of habitats and corridors are some of the reasons for increasing human-tiger conflict. WWF India has been working in the forests of Pilibhit for more than a decade to support wildlife conservation. It supports the Forest Department in such situations to minimize the impact of conflict on affected communities. A robust human-wildlife management protocol, including mob management strategy, will help the Forest Department officials in managing such volatile situations. Frequent education and awareness-building exercises are also important to ensure that human-wildlife conflict is managed well.
So, thank you very much. Can you hear me? What I
Yes.
wanted to convey, I want to end it by
Go ahead, Keshav.
something that I read in the 1,000-year-old book of I Ching in China. And it says, without the breath of the tiger, there would be no wind. So this is I Ching, 1,000-year-old writer. Without the breath of the tiger, there would be no wind. There would be clouds, but there would be no rain. So even 1,000 years ago, the people understood the value of a tiger in terms of climate change, in the influence that it has in protecting their forests. And if they protect the forest, if you protect the tiger, you protect other animals also. So thank you very much, and congratulations to Tigers United. I hope we have a great way forward. You'll be hearing Rajesh Gopal after this. And we have to work very hard toward Vladivostok. I mean, it has to be an agenda, which is not the usual agenda, and we have to review what has worked and what has not worked, and to look at the possibilities as they emerge into a world after COVID. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you, Keshav. That was very informative and inspirational as well. I'm going to turn it over to Rochelle. She's got some questions that have come from the audience, and we've got about 5 minutes we can spend on Q&A. So Rochelle?
Hello, good morning. We have a couple of questions from Bruno, and I've given him permission. If so, I'm going to let him ask his questions live.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Keshav, for a great presentation. I have a couple of questions that are linked to the current pandemic, actually. So the first one has to do with the impact of the pandemic on tiger conservation in Asia. As you know, on the African continent, because of the pandemic, there are many less tourists visiting protected national parks. And as a result, there is a decline in revenues in national parks, but there is also an increased poaching. So my first question has to do with what is the impact of the pandemic on tiger conservation in Asia, whether you have observed similar trends on the Asian continent.
So Bruno, nice to see you. And nice to hear you too. So Bruno has been a great colleague, has encouraged the team to do so much work on tiger conservation. Bruno, one direct impact is that resources have gone down to less than 30% because of pandemic. And these are resources, ongoing budgets have got cut, and projects have been slowed down. So definitely there is an impact, and rather adverse impact, on tiger conservation. Actually impact on all issues connected with environmental sustainability. That is not a priority, and that is where this has gone down significantly. Poaching, yeah, there are reports when the migrants in India went back to their homes, and there were millions and millions of them. Then they have been talk about poaching, but I think the forest officials have been extremely alert in that regard. So that poaching part has not really come about with a significant impact. But there has been talk about, because people don't have livelihoods, they don't have resources. So, but definitely pandemic has brought down tourist traffic. But one thing which we are seeing is that the Indian tourist, at least in India, they are going to national parks because they are also feeling that they can escape the congestion and the infected environment of the cities. So a lot of them are going to the national parks. So did I. We also went to the national parks and spent a lot of time out of Delhi and such places. What is the second question, Bruno?
Thank you, Keshav. Yes, the second question is also linked to the pandemic. As you know, coming out of hopefully coming out of the pandemic, lots of discussion about how can we seriously reduce the risk of future pandemics, and in particular addressing the spillover, the risk of zoonotic disease. There are many initiatives. I mean, we are working, as you know, we are working on one with the end pandemic, that Earth, which is really addressing a lot of the issues that we have been working on Tiger Initiative for many years, which have to do with cracking down on illegal wildlife trade, reducing demand, protecting landscapes, and what have you. So the question is, how can we use Vladivostok also as a platform to convey the urgency of conservation and tiger conservation, snow leopard conservation, as really not only sort of business as usual, but a real imminent threat that we all feel now in our guts because we have experienced this pandemic over the last year. It is time to really push for changing the relationship with nature. And really address a lot of these issues that I just mentioned. So how can we do that in Vladivostok?
Actually, it's a great question, and we were discussing it today, that when we go to Vladivostok, we should go to these great leaders and with some issues relating to COVID, issues relating to infrastructure, fragmenting the tiger conservation landscape. Major issues, we have to take it to them because they have to understand that nature, I mean, the significance of nature has been conveyed through this pandemic. And the way we can abuse nature and the impact of it is also very clearly out there. But Bruno, one thing which I am seeing, that it is a world in which people forget very fast. You have a crisis and everybody is very intensely aware of it, and that crisis passes and it is usually business as usual. So I am really, we have to go for better infrastructure, health and infrastructure in the national parks also. As you have visited with me, a lot of national parks have no health infrastructure. So both for wildlife as well as for humans who visit it, we have to upgrade that. This will require, it's not going to happen immediately. We have to create a sense of urgency out there. But a lot of country policymakers are rather confused in which direction to really emphasize. So it is generally employment and how many get jobs, and small scale and medium scale industry or banks and all these things. I think they haven't turned their attention to the importance of nature and wildlife and environment in containing this thing. I'm frankly, Bruno, I'm not being able to answer your question with a very positive response because I'm not seeing that happening here.
Thank you, Keshav.
Keshav, I think we're about out of time. Let me remind our audience, if I can, that if you do have other questions, if you'll send them straight to us, we will include that in a package that we get answers to while we have a little more time to address them, and then we'll get that out to everyone and trying to increase our awareness of the problems. Keshav, thank you very much for that inspirational talk. But as our time comes to a close today, I hope that each of y'all will join us for our next webinar in this series that's going to be held on April 6th, when Dr. Rashesh Gopal, the Secretary General of the Global Tiger Forum, will discuss the state of the Secretariat and the status of tigers in each of the 13 tiger range countries as we continue on our march to Vladivostok. So let me end today by saying thank you all for joining us. Please accept our best wishes for continued health and happiness. And we look forward to seeing you again on April 6th. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brett. My regards to everyone in the family and to all the faculty and students and everybody who took the time to attend this. Thank you very much.
Well, on behalf of all four universities, Keshav, we really appreciate your friendship and all your.
And you still owe me the bourbon.
We'll catch up on that one later. All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks, Rochelle.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Rachel, for organizing.